Well, good morning. Welcome back to Tulsa. This is a video that I've been putting off for a long time, but it's just been a lot to think about and try to put together. The biggest issue that I had when deciding whether or not to move to Tulsa is all of the negative information I was getting about it being very hostile and dangerous for people of color. This is an extremely complex issue. We're touching just briefly on some dark moments in American history, challenges that America faces in the present, and I am not a qualified historian or a social expert. I can only speak from my personal experience as a Black African American, FBA, whatever label, we're using this week. I am giving you my real, raw, and candid experience. There is a particular opportunity that is available here in Tulsa. We will not be naming them in this video, but you may know based on my other content what I'm talking about. I was accepted into that program, and that afforded me the opportunity to move to Tulsa. I never would have considered living in Oklahoma. I moved to Tulsa from Houston. One of my best friends from college years was living in Houston for years prior and spoke highly of Houston, encouraged me to check out the city, thinking that I would love it. And as time went on, there was this massive move where lots of people were moving to Texas and Houston. I was getting perspectives, not just from, one person, but there were multiple people that I knew who were living or had lived in Houston. If you're moving across the country or you're moving to a new city, you're definitely going to look for information about that place. As I began looking for information about Tulsa, tapping into those resources, like the personal resources, feedback was negative. It was like completely opposite of Houston, right? Where pretty much 100% of people say Houston is a great place. It has its pros and cons, but I would highly recommend that you give it a try. Go ahead and move there. I mentioned that there's an organization that is sponsoring people to move to Tulsa. This video is in no way sponsored, endorsed, promoted, approved, authorized. Any word that you can, fill in the blank with by that organization. I am doing this video completely and 100% independently as a human living in Tulsa who has recently moved here and living here for about the past roughly 30 days. Okay, so this is not their video, this is my video. I really hope that this video sort of sparks some conversation and some open dialogue about this very serious and fascinating, in my opinion, topic. So let's get to it. Why was I worried about moving to Tulsa? Well, when I began telling people that I was moving to Tulsa, I started getting messages like this one.
Oklahoma is super racist. I wouldn't stay there very long. My grandmother grew up in Oklahoma, and the stories that they used to talk about. And then, stuff featured you here in history, from history about Oklahoma and how they treated Black people and Native Americans. So, yeah, it's super racist. Definitely would be careful there.
So I'm living in Texas, and so you have a lot of people who have connections to Oklahoma. Being in the Deep South, many people I met, their family, their grandparents had come from states like Arkansas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Alabama, those states that have just a very bad reputation for the treatment of Black people throughout history and even recently. We all know about the Tulsa race massacre that occurred in 1921. I feel like that has been just a recurring theme. Every podcast, blog, politician, people bring up Black Wall Street in almost any situation, in any scenario. George Floyd happened, people talked about the Greenwood Massacre. Kamala Harris becomes the Democratic candidate, people somehow began talking about the Tulsa Race Massacre. It's like this Tulsa Race Massacre has become the symbol for Black life, the civil rights movement, there's so many things. I don't know how that happened. Movements of people thinking that, we're going to bring Black Wall Street back and all of these things. And singers, rappers, politicians, everyone you can think of is talking about Black Wall Street. Maybe people are just really hyper aware of Tulsa and Oklahoma and maybe ignoring some other cities or states that have a problematic history in lieu of Tulsa, right? Other Tulsa history, of course, includes the Trail of Tears. I think most Americans, if you went through the public school system, you should be familiar with what I'm talking about. So I'm not going to get into that too much. It just sets the stage between, I think, the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, the Trail of Tears. There's some other situations around Oklahoma giving them this really bad reputation. It was really odd to me that my Texas friends whose their grandparents had come from Oklahoma and Mississippi, and all of these other states, or even Texas. Texas has its own problematic history, and they were just really dragging Oklahoma and warning me, beseeching me even to not move there, and, being genuinely, it seemed like genuinely fearful. And then I began to branch out. And even Hispanic people were saying their stories were more recent, right? And they would say, my aunt was living there for a while and she really didn't like it. And she, packed up everything and moved her family back to Texas as soon as possible. So I've talked to two so-called minority populations, right? I've talked to Black people and I've talked to Hispanic people at this point, and both of them are saying, I personally would not go to Tulsa, wouldn't live there. I told one of my white friends, he just got very quiet and very solemn. And he took a deep breath and said, wow, careful, be very careful, be very safe. With those Texas friends who were totally against Oklahoma, you would say to them, wow, so your family left, Little Rock, Selma, some of those other top 5 for those cities that have that name recognition for either the civil rights movement or a race riot or a massacre or something like that. And so if they're coming from that background, what is it that makes them think that Tulsa is any worse than those cities or those other hundreds of nameless cities that have similar histories? So according to Wikipedia, we have Portsmouth, Ohio, Wyandotte, Michigan, Pollock, Louisiana, Salina, Tennessee, Comanche County, Texas, Paragould, Arkansas, Lexington, Oklahoma, Blackwell, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's on the list again, but they're not alone. They're not lonely. Monet, Missouri, Linton, Indiana, Elwood, Indiana, Wilmington, North Carolina. I remember learning about that one. Pana, Illinois, Carterville, Illinois. Mena, Arkansas, Pierce City, Missouri, Decatur, Indiana, Sour Lake, Texas, Joplin, Missouri, Marshall County, Kentucky, Forsyth County, Georgia, East St. Louis, Corbin, Kentucky, Okochee, Florida. The list goes on. And I was just reading the list up to the Tulsa Race Massacre. So I'm not even touching on anything that's happened since then. So why is it that everyone knows about the Tulsa Race Massacre, has all of these strong feelings about it, but can continue to live in their city where similar atrocities occurred? Is it just bad PR? Started just diving into this, getting some history lessons, watching hours upon hours of documentaries about the Tulsa Race Massacre. One of the reasons behind me watching all of those documentaries was to get a sense of the sentiment in the city currently. Was there progress in the African American community since the rise and fall and second rise and second fall, or ultimate dissolution of the so-called Black Wall Street or Greenwood community? And I shouldn't say dissolution because Greenwood is still there. I'm actually going on a tour later this week, and I will ask about the possibility of doing some recording while I'm on the tour so I can share a little bit with you. What I was seeing, though, was overwhelmingly positive. I've seen other documentaries like that. I'm sure some of you have, right? And they'll end with, well, that was a dark time in American history. Now we're over 100 years later, and the people of Tulsa are vehemently racist, wicked, murderous. They were not ending like that. The organization that I did end up moving to Tulsa with, they actually were tackling this issue, and they have some videos up. So if you're researching, look for that. Look for the interviews that they've done with some African-American people who have moved here with the program. And talk about how there's this effort of transparency and openness and reconciliation and sort of moving forward and things like that. Very promising to me. That was one of the main factors that helped me make the decision to go ahead and make this move, despite what I was hearing from people and seeing online. It really just boiled down to like having to make my own decision about it. I mean, does Tulsa just have the worst PR in America? Even when I was doing the thumbnail for this video using Canva, if you type Tulsa into their search, one of the top results, or the first results that you get, is a photo from the Tulsa Race Massacre. I mean, what other city would you find something like this? It also felt like Tulsa was almost promoting this, like it had gone to the point of being open about it, including it in history of the city, along with things like the Trail of Tears and things like that are really shameful history. I think if a city can sort of take ownership for something like that and decide to reconcile and move forward, that is very powerful. Versus a lot of those cities that I just read off the list. So I had made my decision that I was going to go ahead and move to Tulsa, despite people's opinions and what I had seen in history. And so I started then searching for places to go, things to do. I started searching for things: Black middle class in Tulsa, Tulsa Black dentist, Tulsa Black anything. I mean, it got to the point where I was literally searching for absolutely anything in connection, Tulsa HBCU or Oklahoma HBCU, and everything came back to the Tulsa Race Massacre. I mean, like 99% of what I was finding, it was like there was no African-American presence in Tulsa since then. Maybe it's just that this whole Black Wall Street situation is so popular right now. I don't even want to call it popular, but I think you know what I mean. It's like you can't escape it, right? You just hear about it constantly. Charlemagne the God is talking about it one minute, and Candace Owens is talking about it the next, and everyone in between, right? So that was really concerning. I started looking for sort of more mundane things. I tend to go to Black-owned holistic health spas of massage therapists, estheticians, even waxing, things like that. Just those everyday activities of life. I was able to find barbers, hairstylists, soul food restaurants, but anything beyond that, I think like skilled trades, medical professionals, lawyers, dentists, doctors, and I just couldn't find any. So now that made me wonder, okay, are there issues with like systemic racism? Are Black people being blocked from starting these types of businesses? Or one of the reasons that this program I'm in is bringing people to Tulsa is because they have a serious problem with brain drain. So is it just that Black Tulsans are going ahead, getting the education or the technical skills to have these careers, and then they just run away and move away from Tulsa? I still wasn't ruling the city out based on the fact that I could not find a Black gynecologist or family care doctor or anything like that. I also had the idea that there's probably a strong chance, because there's so much. I mean, when you search anything about Tulsa and add like African-American or Black, all search engines are returning so much of everything about the race massacre. I'm thinking that maybe that information is just buried, and I will start to find it once I move to Tulsa. Other things I did in my research process is I joined the Tulsa Reddit. And I was definitely on the lookout for anything that was racially driven there. And surprisingly, the people who are on the Tulsa Reddit, they tend to express really like liberal opinions. A lot of what I saw was around the politics in Oklahoma, specifically, hot button issues that came up throughout 2024 as I was preparing to move, bringing the Bible back in schools, the Native population having to advocate for themselves within the government, Governor Stitt and some of his policies. And what I was finding in the Reddit and the subreddits is that this really seemed to be like a liberal city, like people said, and it seems like people were open-minded and able to, think critically and have difficult conversations. Like, I was very impressed. Other Reddits that I've read through, people just begin, attacking people, or you sort of see people spewing out phrases or catchphrases that have been in the media that you can tell that people aren't thinking about things on their own. They just feel like they've picked a side and they have to just regurgitate and recite whatever other people are saying, right? And Tulsa also has been in the spotlight for their school system. Tulsa is rated like 49th in the nation for education. And the combination of people being racist and poorly educated as well. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. And in a state where the gun laws are very lax. A recipe for disaster. Time was getting closer for me to move to Tulsa. And movers came, packed up my pod and drove it away. And it was on its way headed to Tulsa. I saw a really disturbing Reddit post where a young woman was talking about the perception of racism in Tulsa. And she gave this long, detailed story talking about how her brother-in-law, I think it was her brother or brother-in-law, had been harassed at work and finally forced to quit his job. I can't remember all details of the story at this point, but he was hard-R'd multiple times to the point where he just could not take it anymore. And people were seeming very, very cold, very mean and indifferent to this woman's story. And wow, so I'm in Houston in the wake of Hurricane Beryl. The power has been out now for about a week and I'm preparing to move to Tulsa. So between the heat, my irritation, my trepidations about moving to Tulsa in the first place, and then I'm reading this crazy story and I'm sitting in my car to charge my phone and use the Wi-Fi, and literally that post popped up. I'm like, my apartment is completely cleared out. I've paid all my deposits. I've signed my contract to join this organization in Tulsa for the next year. And this is what I'm reading. Horrified. I was horrified. Since I've been in Tulsa, I've made a couple friends and acquaintances here. And one of them, I was telling her about this story and she was with her brother at the time. And she's like, what? That is not true. That can't be true. It's like, who told you that? And I'm like, Reddit. It's on Reddit. So I'm like explaining to them. I'm like, please pull it up and read this so that you know I'm not making it up, right? And okay, have you ever in your life been hard-R'd? Is there he's like, hard-R, like what even is that, And she's like, apparently people are getting called the N-word all throughout, elementary school and out in the street. You just walk down the street and people are like, hey, N-word, get out of here, beat it, scram. I don't mean to laugh about that. I'm laughing now because in a minute, this will come into perspective. And they begin laughing hysterically, right? Like, this is the most ridiculous thing they've ever heard. And, so she's in her late 30s. He's, I think, like 50. And they're like, never in our lifetimes have we ever been subjected to this kind of like Jim Crow type of segregational racism that people are describing in Tulsa in 2024. Absolutely not. And the brother says, you know what? I think he's not completely clear. Maybe he wasn't like too familiar with Reddit, right? He's like, is this your friend? This guy likes being polite to the end, right? And I'm like, no. It's just somebody I heard about saying that this happened. And he's like, man, I think that guy, he must have done some BS at his job. Maybe he failed a drug test or something. And lost his job. And, he came up with this outrageous story and the little sister ran with it. And I'm like, well, maybe so, but I mean, what about the other people, who are chiming in? And it's so hard on the internet because you never know who could be a bot. At this point, I was relieved. Well, this is the other thing too, She's like, well, and you still came? Like, you saw all of this, you heard all of this, and you still came to Tulsa. And I was like, part of me, like, there was just something in the back of my mind that was like, is this really true? I don't know. And then also the hard-R story. At that point, all of my stuff was already gone. I mean, everything, like 8 things were in motion, right? To where it would be very difficult to change my minds now. So I kind of was like, I'm going to just go ahead, push ahead, move forward with this. But if I have to, I will leave. I'll come back home to Texas. And I had been in Tulsa probably at least 2 weeks before having that conversation. And I was relieved, but it also made me a little suspicious about the Black people here. Are they just so used to this? Or are they just in denial? The hard-R story, that really made me think about just other situations and scenarios. I was recalling where my old boss, she had gone to Arizona and she's in an interracial marriage. Her husband is Black, her kids are mixed. And she was just telling me about how horrible and racist, what a horrible experience her family had between her children in the schools, her husband having a hard time at work, and someone I know who is credible and honest, telling me about the story that happened to them. Yes, in a whole nother state, but it just made me more aware that, hey, you know, these kind of situations are alive and well. And another Reddit story, I saw a Hispanic business owner, a contractor, had posted about how he came out to do a job. There was an elderly Caucasian couple in the house that threatened to shoot them, hurled racial slurs at them. This was in the city of Tulsa. There were people, specifically Black and Hispanic people, were telling me, don't go to Oklahoma at all. And then with white people, it was a lot more subtle, where they would say things like, oh, you'll be fine as long as you stay within Tulsa city limits, Tulsa proper. Just don't go outside of there, and be very vigilant. And the organization that I was joining was also requiring everyone to live within Tulsa city limits. But that could be for any variety of reasons, right? I mean, whether it's for tax purposes or whatever. It wasn't necessarily a question of safety, but I just began to conflate all of these things because there's so much going on. There was just so much going on in my mind. The instance of the Hispanic contractors, people seem to really rally around that individual, dragging that old couple, and they were saying that kind of sentiment is dying out in Oklahoma, and thank God for it. And I'm like, well, if it's dying out, it's still there. You know what I mean? And that's disturbing. But then, is it not everywhere? How much was I really just being influenced by, again, all of the media that's out there about Black Wall Street? Fast forward, I arrive in Tulsa. I just have positive experiences from moving into my apartment, moving in, starting to meet and interact with my neighbors. Everyone is very friendly. I just wasn't experiencing any. And every single Black person I encountered, if I was able to have a conversation with them, I would ask them about their feelings and their experience. And everyone denied, they just unequivocally denied any sort of shady business, wrongdoing, or anything, right? And I made sure to talk to people who were not associated with this organization. These were just civilians. I went on a date here, and we're sitting in the restaurant, and I was extremely tense. And I'm looking around, and everyone in the restaurant is white. And that was one of my first outdoors, one of my first experiences of getting out in public outside of my apartment. So all of my interactions within my apartment and going to the grocery store, going to shopping centers, driving down the street, a police officer, going into a store, he actually stopped and was energetically was just very jovial, genuinely smiling. He wasn't doing the whole I'm grabbing my gun, I'm trying to intimidate you thing. And I noticed no one's playing that stupid game where they try to act like they think you're going for their purse or something. I haven't experienced that at all. The way that Tulsa is described, I was expecting that police officer to harass me. I was expecting people to say little nasty things or bump into me or just do anything the N-word with the hard R, right? Because that was what, there's information out there. People are claiming that things like this are happening. They're claiming that it's whites only pies and colored water fountains, like you're stepping back into time, right? Coming into Oklahoma. And that just wasn't my experience. And so I'm on this date, I'm in the restaurant, I'm very tense, and my neck is on swivel. So my date noticed that, of course, and he's like, yeah, are you nervous because there's so many white people? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I told him a little bit about what I had heard about Tulsa. Of course, he was saying, it's really ridiculous. He said, Tulsa has changed a lot. I hear that a lot from Black people here is they won't say anything specifically, but they'll just say Tulsa has changed a lot. Tulsa has improved a lot in a lot of different ways, whether it's socially or with just businesses opening in general, right? Not necessarily Black-owned businesses, but just having more access to things and the city becoming more cityfied. No one will really talk about anything specific. And he was like, don't be nervous here. Everything's fine. No one's going to do anything to you. And he knew that I was very much it was because of everything that I had seen and read. I'm not a person who's normally jittery or nervous around people of any race, really. At one point, again, I'm there and my neck goes on swivel again because I can't help myself. And this older white woman, she winks at me and I fell apart. He's like, what's wrong? Are you okay? I'm like, nothing. I'm like, oh my gosh, she just winked at me. That must mean that like the mob is on their way. You know, it's not funny. Like I said, this is a very serious topic and I'm a very unserious person. I was like, oh my God, I was ready to go. Like, dessert? We don't need dessert. We don't need anything. Let's get out of here. And realistically, that woman probably saw me, noticed that I looked nervous. I don't know if she had any thought or opinion of that I was nervous because of her and people who look like her. I was just on edge, man, for probably, the first couple weeks, but nothing happened. I was on edge and then nothing happened. And I've been less and less on edge. And I keep asking myself, though, are other Black people in denial? I keep asking myself if people are acting weird. I'm like analyzing and overanalyzing my interactions with other Black people. So I did undergrad in DC. I am a bison. Man, being in the DMV, that was a core experience, a core life experience, right? If you're not familiar with DC, let's say a city like Atlanta. Everything perfect in those cities? Absolutely not. However, there's just a difference in the way that Black people sort of perceive themselves and present themselves, and they seem just more confident in the way that they move in the world, and they have, I think, higher aspirations. And when someone has grown up in this type of environment where they see, doctors and nurses and lawyers and Black blue-collar workers, and they go to a school where they're taught about history, but they're not taught to be ashamed of themselves, right? And their skin color. And it's just a different way that those people move in the world, grown up and lived and had the ability to thrive in these types of cities or types of environments. Based on what I had heard about Tulsa, I was expecting the exact opposite, right? So that would be like self-hating, little ambition, and that is absolutely untrue. I've encountered some Tulsans who are born and raised here that have very good outlooks on life, and they're proud, they're proud to be Black. They are whatever, path they've chosen in life, living it to the best of their ability, that no one is holding them back in Tulsa. I feel like they have every opportunity to live the life that they choose here. And that is very encouraging. And I know that all of these people can't just be suffering from Stockholm syndrome. I've stopped trying to diagnose everyone with Stockholm syndrome. Looking for signs of it. Everyday experience with white people in Tulsa, they have been extremely normal. Most people that I've spoken to and interacted with outside of the program that I'm in, very welcoming. They're just normal people. They don't treat me anyway. They're not treating me special because I'm Black, and they're not treating me like a subhuman because I'm Black. And that is wonderful. I am here. I'm still alive. It has been over a month, like a month and a week now that I've been living in Tulsa. I have not been assaulted, accosted, arrested, discriminated, excluded, hard, slapped, spit on, posed. I mean, white people haven't really acknowledged me other than to wave furiously and say hello and be kind and not grab their purse and not act like macho tough guys. Like, it's not even questionable. So are not going out of their way to prove to me that they're not racist or anything. It's like a live and let live sort of situation. And in reality, if I can be honest, that's really all I want. I remember having experiences in the Pacific Northwest, right? There for a short vacation. And wow, I mean, people were like aggressively liberal, right? And that was cool. It was an interesting experience, right? As you like move around the country or visit different places and have these different experiences. And that's really awesome. It's also stressful as well. Just trying to live up to other people's expectations or to sort of satisfy their need, to be good or be bad, right? Well, Black people are assuring me and reassuring me emphatically that they are okay, blinking twice. And it just seems less political than Texas. Going back to the hard R story, when I was asking people about that particular family, I also asked about what I was hearing as far as being Black and not going into places like Broken Arrow and Jinx and things like that. And their grandmother, elders in the family have been living in like Oak Mulgee and own property. Had like an uncle in Broken Arrow. They were just like, I don't know where all of this information is coming from, but it's absolutely untrue. I do feel comfortable moving around or visiting, like going to a store now in Broken Arrow or something, or going to Okmulgee for the rodeo. I found out that they have a black rodeo in Okmulgee every year. I would love to see that. Now, I have been told, though, there are some places in Oklahoma that you just absolutely should not go. 2 years ago, there was an uproar about some racist officials in a city that's about 2 hours away from here. Basically, a recording device in the police station, and they were saying all kinds of horrific things. Black Tulsans, what I've gotten, when I ask them about that scenario specifically, they say, oh, well, that's just Claremore, or that's just whatever city, that you bring up. It seems like they pretty much live comfortably and travel between like Tulsa, the Tulsa suburbs, and then Oklahoma City and the Oklahoma City suburbs. They concentrate their lives between those two areas, and they're completely fine and satisfied with that. I'm like, well, what if I decided that I wanted to like drive to Memphis or something like that? Like, well, a lot of the people that I've spoken to so far don't really do things like that, or they're like, well, just fly to Memphis. That's their answer. So it's interesting. This story will continue to unfold. I'll definitely continue to share with you guys if weird things start happening. If I ended up leaving early or something like that, I will let you guys know, but I don't anticipate that. I don't think that's going to happen at all. I am not by any means living in fear. I feel very comfortable here, and I wouldn't stay otherwise. Come to think of it, when I was on my way driving to Houston, different people were like calling, checking in on me, how I was doing on the road. And I just I'd been on the phone with my mom for like over an hour, not paying attention. And I was hitting the Alabama border right around sunset. So my homeboy's calling me. He's like, hey, where are you at on the road? My homeboy calls me, checks in how I'm doing. And I'm like, man, I just hit Alabama. Coming from the north, I have all of these fears and negative associations about Alabama. And he goes, oh my God, you can't be on the road in Alabama at night. He's like, I'm going to call my homeboy and have you go to his mom's house. I have these feelings in America about the South, but things have happened all over the country. No one says, oh my God, Jamestown, Virginia, you can't go there. Don't drive there. I just had a few minutes of talking about how much I love DC. Crazy things have happened in DC. Even when I got to Texas, I had people saying, oh, don't go here, don't go there. You don't go to Tyler, right? Things like that. But yeah, that is why I was nervous and a little bit afraid to move to Tulsa. I've moved to Tulsa anyway. I'm glad that I did. Yes, this is going to drive my YouTube engagement, but on any other video, I don't really beg for people to like and subscribe and comment and stuff like that. But I'm really, really interested in this situation. What have people's experiences been like? If you've been living in Tulsa, if you left Tulsa, if you considered Tulsa and then didn't come because of what you saw. White people, Black people, Native people, Hispanics, I would love to hear from you all. I mean, as long, let's keep it respectful. Even if you're a white person and you're like, I wish you didn't bring your Black butt to Oklahoma, you can say that. I'm sure, I don't think YouTube would delete it, and I surely won't. And if anyone attacks you for it, I'll delete their comment, because I think a huge problem in America is that we just try to suppress everything. We pretend like there is no problem, but we need to get some things out, I feel like, in this country and move forward. Maybe that's what Tulsa has done or is trying to do. But I will keep you guys posted about my experience, and I would love if you shared yours. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all. I love you. Peace.